right, welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of Education in Color. Today I am joined by the lovely CUNY School of Law Dean, I guess Dr. Sudha Setty?
I think Dean is fine. I don't actually have a PhD. So.
Got you. So Dean Setty. Dean Setty, take it away with your introductions.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. As you said, my name is Sudha Setty. I've served as Dean at CUNY Law School for the last year. I'm just entering my second year here, and I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you for that, and congrats on your second year here. Now let's just dive right in with the first question, which is, how did your experiences and background shape your passion for promoting diversity and inclusion within the legal profession?
So I appreciate that. I think that, I grew up mostly in New England and in communities where perhaps there was less racial diversity than in places like New York City. And so I grew up from an early age thinking about what it means to feel included, what it means to feel like you're part of a community and feel supported in that. I think my parents, who immigrated from India, really inculcated in me the importance of listening to others, approaching difficult situations with empathy, and thinking about what it really means to see people as individually human and not make assumptions or judgments about them based on who they are, what their background is, and whatever else. So for me, growing up, that was the kind of cultural background that I had. And as I got older and went to college and law school, I thought a lot about it, what it meant to be included in something like the legal profession, which has historically been an overwhelmingly white profession in the United States, and one that even despite efforts to diversify it over many, many decades, persists in being an overwhelmingly white profession. I think law firms, legal organizations, law schools, and others are doing a lot of work to try to improve that situation. I think a lot of folks feel like diversification of the legal profession is a key priority that we need to move forward with. But certainly we can say that progress has been difficult, and that for me it continues to be a core value of what I think is important for the profession and therefore important for law schools.
And thank you for that answer. I just want to clarify. You said New England. My immediate thought went to London, right? But I'm assuming that's England. New England's in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I grew up mostly in Connecticut and Massachusetts.
Got it. And you said that growing up in Connecticut and Massachusetts, it was a little bit different. You felt more included. So does that mean that the makeup of the communities over there were more reflective of you and your family?
No, actually, I think that I felt included in the community despite those communities not necessarily reflecting my family's experience or background. I think like a lot of immigrant families, my parents tended to both make friends with whomever was around them in the community, but also seek out other folks who had similar experiences. So I grew up with lots of South Asian connections through my parents and the organizations they were a part of, but also grew up feeling very much included in the communities that didn't look like me, but were great places to grow up and live.
Mm-hmm. And growing up, what was your relationship with school and just education in general?
How do you mean?
Like, I guess, so for me, for example, right, like growing up, school, it was very important in my family, right? So I'd always be in like the tutoring centers, and they'd always be like leering over me with like the spoon they'd use to like cook the curry or whatever, and be like, you better be doing your math homework. So, I had a fond perception of education growing up, but then at certain points I felt like I may not have been challenged as much, or at certain points I felt maybe excluded or what have you. So kind of like that, like what education meant to you as a kid and then what it means to you now and your feelings, So
sure, I appreciate that. So I think that I always grew up, again, from my family, placing a very high value on education. I do recall my mom telling me that because English was not my first language, that I was immediately put into remedial programs when I started in school, and they very quickly understood that although English was not my first language, that I did also understand English and was able to integrate into the kind of mainstream classroom. And so there's always that kind of, I think, tension underlying these relationships, right? How is it that you're perceived as included or not included in an educational system? I think for me, for the most part, I went to public schools, again, in Massachusetts and Connecticut growing up, and felt that they were good environments, overall supportive environments. And, for me, it was never an option to not go forward and go to college, right? That was a baseline expectation in my family. And to me, that felt very comfortable.
Got it. And as an advocate for social justice lawyering. What strategies do you believe are crucial in creating a more equitable legal system and institutions?
So I think in this moment, I would say persistence has to be a key attribute of folks who are fighting for racial justice, for fighting for diversity and inclusion. I think we're at a moment societally where it's very difficult. There are some headwinds given, say, recent decisions by the Supreme Court to find affirmative action programs to be unconstitutional. It requires a kind of rethinking of strategies around higher education in terms of equity and racial justice writ large. Again, we are in a very highly polarized environment right now in terms of our kind of societal conversation. So persistence is important. I think also collaboration and listening, which are sometimes the hardest things to do when you feel very passionately about a topic, but to try to really approach very difficult, complicated issues with empathy. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are blunting your passion for something, but that you are educating yourself on what other perspectives are and trying to use that to help you build a stronger coalition, a stronger collaboration to work towards racial justice, right? We know that both projects of seeking racial justice writ large and things like diversifying a profession, they're not the work of 2 years or 5 years, right? They're the work of generations. It takes a lot of energy over time to do this. And so if you build coalitions, if you think collaboratively, think with an open mind about how it is to build a stronger coalition that can persist through a lot of challenging times, I think that's going to be a recipe for greater success in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And I really like the piece you were talking about collaboration, because it just got me thinking. One of the guests that we had prior, Carol Mason, she was talking about how she loves surrounding herself with people that not only challenge her, but come from different backgrounds. Because for me growing up too, I was always surrounded by people who came from different backgrounds, but it wasn't until I started my career in education that I realized having people who come from different backgrounds and even locations, because you and someone can like share like ethnic heritage, but then depending on the location you guys grew up may have vastly different, upbringings and how you view education or how you just view the world in general.
Sure.
And so the way I look at it is I'm in my mind 24/7. I don't really, I care about what I think, but I don't care too much about what I think to the point where I'm not going to listen to others, because you're right. It is the work that you really need to collaborate with, especially if you're dealing with something as, I guess, I don't want to say touchy, but as important as diversity, because it's not something that's like a cookie cutter solution you can do for every state, every city, every locality.
That's right. And I appreciate what you're saying. I agree with that. I do think there is a real challenge and a real difficulty for all of us to put ourselves in a position of listening, especially with people with whom we disagree, right? And maybe we disagree passionately about something. But there is actually a lot of strength that comes through dialogue across differences. And I think that's seen in educational environments. I think it's seen in workplaces, right? There's lots of studies that have been done that really effective workplaces in terms of problem solving and meeting new challenges and thinking flexibly comes from having people from diverse backgrounds, but also diverse points of view and life experiences that inform those points of view. I think, again, that is really hard work. It's not always comfortable work, but it is important work to build institutions, to build movements, and to kind of move forward in a way that can lead to hopefully sustained progress on really difficult issues.
Agreed. And moving towards our next question, I want to ask you, could you share some insights on the importance of an equitable childhood education in building a more inclusive and diverse society? Yeah,
actually, it's incredibly important, right? I think we all agree on that. And actually, when I say we all agree, I think that even across the broad political spectrum, there's a significant amount of agreement on that. I think back decades ago to when Proposition 209 passed in California, which was outlawing affirmative action there in higher education. And the proponents of that proposition, again, the one that's eliminating affirmative action, really said, it's not that we don't believe in diversity and the strength of that. It's that we think that there needs to be more investment in early childhood education and pipeline programs in developing the K through 12 or maybe pre-K through 12 pipeline of folks to bring them into colleges and graduate programs and whatever else. And there's a space where we can, folks from very different political points of view can meet on this. And I think we all agree, yes, that investment is crucial. And I think, at the law school, I think we're really excited that we do have pipeline programs that are now, 15 years old that help draw students in from colleges, right? And who draw non-traditional students who perhaps don't have the highest test indicators as an initial matter, but who show tremendous promise in law school, and that they're going to be a real asset to the profession when they get out there. And we try to work with those folks, right, to help them get into law school and then to be successful here and to become successful practitioners. And we're trying to do even more in that regard. And I think now it's more important than ever as we try to reach out with new programs. We have a new youth collaborative program that we are starting just this spring that reaches out to middle schools and high schools and tries to work with those students, with law students, undergraduate students, and lawyers to try to think about mentoring and think about classes and curriculum that can reach folks where they currently are and help them think about the future that's in front of them. Because I do think all of these folks who maybe historically wouldn't have thought about college or not about law school, we can frame it as like, oh, we're helping them, but honestly, they're helping us, right? They're making the law school better, they're making the profession better, and it goes towards that larger project of racial equity, diversity, and inclusion.
And the one piece you mentioned that I was like, oh my God, this brought me back to like when I was in high school, was the program where you connected the youth with current law school students. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program. It's called High School Law Institute.
No.
Oh, so it was a program that I did in high school. And I don't know if it still goes on, but essentially with the program, they had a whole bunch of high schoolers, and we would go to Columbia Law School where we were taught by 1L, 2L, and 3L law students on the topics of like civil law as well as criminal law and even a little bit of torts.
Is this the one where they did a mock trial program at the end of it?
I think so.
Because I went to Columbia as a law student, and I actually volunteered in that program. I guess I don't know if it was a different one or the same one, but it might have been then. It sounds familiar.
Because I remember in the end we had like a brief, and we had to pick out who's going to be the plaintiff, who's going to be the defense attorney, and all this type of stuff. But what it brings me to is that program was great. Like, even though I'm not a lawyer now, luckily if I do need lawyers, I'm just going to call you up, be like, hey, could you bail me out? Nah, I'm just messing with you. But the thing is, what it made me realize at that point was, wow, like I had the support and I had the insight because I did that program when I think I was a sophomore. Yeah. So then when I was a junior, I applied to another internship, which was called the Thurgood Marshall internship. And then that looped me in with Skadden. So I did an internship at Skadden via that. But that wouldn't have happened had I not been in the HSLI program, which then connected me to this program and then connected me to another internship opportunity. Yeah. All that to say is when you really do start young and you invest at that early age, it's a lot of people who are interested, but unfortunately may not have the funds or the means to put their children in those programs. So at the very least, if those programs are out there, if a child knows about it, they could say to their parent, oh, all I need you to do, sign this permission slip. Everything else is comped. That's right. And it really, really lowers that barrier of entry, because I think that's the one thing a lot of people don't realize. The barrier of entry is what's kind of causing this I guess lack of diversity, because in reality, if you have people who are from a different socioeconomic class and they could pay for all this type of stuff from K through 12, of course they're gonna have a leg up compared to someone who doesn't have that socioeconomic status.
I agree with that, and I also think that there's an opportunity to engage with folks who might not know anything about a particular field. Like in this case, we're talking about the legal profession. We can do it with anything, right? Medical school, journalism, whatever. That if there's folks who in their families or communities just haven't dealt with people in those professions, it seems completely foreign, or that you have a misimpression of what it is based on TV or movies or some other form of media. And so the ability to talk to have like real people who are either in law school or lawyers who come in and humanize that profession for you makes it a much more accessible thing as well. So they're the barriers to entry that you're talking about, which I agree with 100%. There's money, there's time, there's resources. There's also, I think, kind of opening up people's imagination to what do these careers really do? What type of life do people lead? Why might that be appealing or not appealing? Right? You learn that too in these types of programs.
And it's interesting you mentioned the whole media representation piece, because recently I've been watching Suits, and so as I'm watching Suits, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to law school and interview the dean. So I'm just like, I'm gonna be like a Harvey Specter up in here, right? But and then you got from medical profession, right? Scrubs. Yeah. So there are a lot of these, like, I don't want to say like fantastical type of imagery for people, but it paints it in a different light. And not to say that's not how it's going to be, but it always helps to get like the real world like advice on, okay, this is how it's going to be. You're going to do this and you're going to do that depending on what field you want to go into. Then it gives children the ideas, because when I was younger, I wanted to be everything. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. It wasn't until I like got a little bit older in high school and I started reading requirements for certain things after I took an aptitude test that I'm like, I can't do this. Like, it's not feasible. I'm not going to do this. So it really does help to give them that clear imagery, like lay down all the cards flat in front of them from when they're younger, because I think we often discount how intelligent kids are in terms of the decisions that they can make for themselves.
I think that's right. And I do think exposure to these programs, right, to your point, you were in these programs that were focused on law. Even though you didn't ultimately decide to pursue law, there's the kind of critical thinking piece, there's this informational piece like, oh, there's related fields that may be of more interest or whatever else. There's so much benefit to this. And the humanizing piece cannot be overstated. I mean, personally, whenever I watch law-related movies or TV shows, I find myself like yelling at the TV.
Yeah. Like, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works, exactly. But it doesn't mean they're not enjoyable.
Got it. And damn, I just lost my train of thought because I'm like, oh, I just said something funny, but now I gotta bring it back to something serious, which is, in your role as dean, what initiatives have you implemented to foster a supportive environment for students from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, I think a few things. One is, I mean, here at CUNY, I will say this is one of the most racially diverse law schools in the country. And, it does tremendous work in bringing folks in the door and supporting them while we're here. I give a lot of credit to our student affairs team that helps student organizations that are both include things like affinity groups, like a very active Black Law Students Association here and other affinity groups as well, and also folks who are interested in particular issues, right? So an environmental law coalition or other types of things to help support students in their pathways. I think it also helps to have an environment in which there's a lot of students from a lot of different backgrounds who are here in the building, in your classes, in your clubs, in the hallway. To your point earlier, it's not that they're all going to have similar viewpoints on anything, but in that milieu, it gives a freedom of allowing people to be themselves and to explore different aspects of themselves. I also think it helps to have an incredibly diverse faculty and staff here at the law school. It creates an environment in which I hope every student, this is our goal, regardless of background, feels included and feels part of a community here. I have to say, I know this is true for law schools everywhere, and certainly CUNY Law School is one of them. The effects of COVID, right, of being apart and being remote for so long. I think at every probably law school, college, high school, whatever else, it led to a fraying of community, right? That was very difficult to overcome. And so, even last year, which was our first full year back in in-person education here at the law school, working really hard to build community among students, to give them opportunities to be together. That's so key, right? That's again, another aspect of that kind of humanization piece of bringing us together and reminding us that we all wanted to support each other in this space. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you mentioned the whole COVID piece, because when I was a teacher, it was like during like 2021, so like right kind of after the pandemic, but we were still in the pandemic. A lot of these kids that I was teaching, so I taught 7th grade, co-taught 8th and 6th. A lot of the students that we were dealing with, they had a lot of issues stemming from the pandemic. Learning loss being one of them, but I think one thing that people have really started to double down on is like mental and emotional health. Yeah. Because in reality, that's when like a lot of my students didn't want to do no work sometimes. And your initial thought, like I have a saying on this, which is like the way you initially think is how you were conditioned to think. But the way you then think afterwards is how you're conditioning yourself to think. So when it came to some of these students, they didn't want to do anything. I'd be like, these kids don't want to do shit, right? But then my other thought was, well, wait, if I was in their shoes, how would I feel? And then I put myself in their shoes and I'm like, yo, I would not want to do anything either. So the thing is, when it came to how I connected with them, I really offered like that olive branch and focused on the relations first and then learning second. And I know that sounds kind of odd to say, right? Like you'd focus on relations first and then education second, but it really does make a difference in how people view those communities. Of course, that's like middle school. I can only imagine the challenges you'd face dealing with adult learners, because that's, I feel like there's a level of, I don't know, je ne sais quoi, however you say it, like a finesse you need with that. So I guess, could you walk me through what is your thought process in creating these communities now coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's real what you said resonates a lot, because there's a real tension that comes particularly in a graduate program and a professional school program like a law school, where you do want to think about the relationships, the humanity, and the wellness of folks first. We've invested a lot of resources in mental and emotional health and wellness for students, also for staff and faculty here. And I think that has been a terrific investment on our part. I think that, like every institution, we could always do more, but we are trying our best to try to meet those needs. I think the other part that's hard, though, is, law schools, 90% of our students, when they graduate, they want to sit for the bar exam and they want to become practicing lawyers, right. Which means that although there is a certain amount of flexibility that we can offer, there's certain things that you have to try to prepare people for, right? There's a huge high stakes exam at the end of 3 or 4 years of law school that has to be taken. And so that, I think, for all law schools led to a great deal of tension and concern around in the year of the pandemic. I think it's no surprise that nationwide the bar passage rates in 2020 were significantly lower than most other years. And I think a lot of law schools put a lot of support in place, including CUNY Law School, for such that the 2021 and 22 takers, started moving in the right direction and feeling more supported in that space. But I think we need to acknowledge that it's been hard and imperfect, that people are trying their best to support students through this, but it's sometimes a very difficult time.
Right. And I guess in preparing your students for the bar exam, I guess what is the one notable shift you and your faculty have started to make, considering the fact that we're coming out of the pandemic and everyone has, I guess, a different viewpoint on how they're going to approach this?
Yeah, so we've tried to do several things. I think one of the biggest things that CUNY has done is to pay for the post-graduation bar exam course, which we've done for the last 2 years, which is, I think, a huge deal, right? We know that financial stressors are part of, that have existed in everyday life, but also were exacerbated by the pandemic for a lot of folks and a lot of families. And so trying to remove one of those stressors in the first instance by saying we will pay for this course, which is usually several $1,000s, in order to help people prepare adequately for the bar exam has been one big step that we've taken. We try to provide bar grants for our students. So in addition to paying for the course, if there's money that we can fundraise for and whatever else to help provide a little bit of support to defray some of the living costs or other expenses that people might have over the summer that they're studying, we try to do that. Again, we have a limited amount that we can do, but we're working hard on that. Those are some of the financial pieces that we're working on. And then for the curriculum, trying to think carefully and thoughtfully, like how do we structure our bar support for students while they're still in law school? How do we work with them on kind of individual academic advising and counseling? How is it that professors in their individual roles can help support students in their learning process? I think, this faculty is one that cares very deeply about teaching and learning and student success. So I think they've devoted a lot of time and energy toward that.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So guys, if you want to go to a law school that's going to pay for your bar stuff afterwards, apply to the CUNY School of Law. Maybe you guys should hire me for your marketing. And actually, you know what? We'll cut that. But I want to ask you, what advice would you give to aspiring legal professionals seeking to make a positive impact on racial justice or equity within their careers?
Come join us, right? There's a lot of work to be done. And, we need more lawyers. We need more lawyers in all types of fields, but CUNY Law School in particular sends more students out into public interest and social justice jobs than any other law school in the country by a long shot. Yep, and over 60% of our students go directly into that kind of work upon graduating, and that kind of work is at its heart serving underserved and historically marginalized communities, and that is amazing, important work. And I am so proud that these students and these graduates go out and stand with the people of New York and then across the country and the world, depending on where they go, in sometimes the hardest moments of people's lives, right? People who are, facing some sort of immigration-related hurdle, people who are facing challenges in the criminal justice system, people who really need this help. And so if you are aspiring to do this work in the world, come join the cadre of folks who are dedicated to doing that. And you can obviously come here and learn with us, but there's many other places that can serve that purpose and to help fulfill. If this is a kind of goal of folks, come do this work. It's important, and we need you.
You know, it's interesting when you said that a lot of your graduates from here, like in terms of the country, go into like the public interest type of fields, because I feel like for me too, I'm in the public sector. So I've realized that anytime like CUNY, right, I look at it, it's very good at kind of producing people who are about the mission CUNY's originally about.
Yep.
Because for me, like I'll be real with you, at first I was just like, yeah, I just want to make a lot of money. But then after a year or two, I'm just like, yeah, money's great, but what is that really going to do for you in the long run, right? You need to do things that really make you feel good about what you do, because then you never really feel like you work a day in your life. And now, moving to the next question, which is, this is my favorite one. How has your experience as the first woman of South Asian descent to serve as dean influenced your decision and approach and vision for the future?
It's a good question. I guess, when I became dean at my previous institution in 2018, I was the, first woman of South Asian descent to be dean at an ABA law school, which was great. I kind of wish 5 years later I wasn't still the only person in that space. So clearly there's work to be done in increasing the cohort of folks who are interested in this kind of work and helping to prepare people to take on these kinds of jobs and actually like these kinds of jobs. I do think it's an interesting space to be in. There are some challenges that come with being the only person who looks like you in a space. And that's true from people within an institution, right? Where that's, me being the dean of a law school is an unusual thing for a lot of people to see. And I still think about in 2018, I was talking to a group of high school students who were part of a pipeline program at my previous institution. And there was a girl who was maybe 15 or 16 years old at the time who, was part of these high school students who were listening to me talk. And, like high school students everywhere, most of them looked kind of like bored or disinterested in what I was saying. But afterwards, she came up to me and she was like, are you really the dean of the law school, like the actual dean, as opposed to perhaps like, an associate dean or another role in the law school? I said, yeah, I'm the dean. And she said, can I have your business card? Because I really want to take it home and show my parents. Because I want them to see that like this is a space that I could be in if I wanted to. And she was very emotional about it. She was crying. I think I started crying.
You're making me tear up too.
Right? It was, and I thought to myself, that's 2018. Right? The fact that this is kind of a shocking thing to see someone like me in these roles in 2018 is not good. Right? We should be beyond that at this point in time. But I reflect on that sometimes because it makes me think about how much work is yet to be done in this space. And I also think that because, I kind of sit alone in this space sometimes, there are folks who kind of question my ability to lead and question my ability to be the face of the law school in certain spaces. And that's not always easy to manage. And so I think it takes a lot of fortitude. I have been very grateful for a community of other law school deans across the country. I think one of the benefits of COVID has been lots of folks who meet on Zoom more often than they would have in the past. And there's a terrific cohort of women of color deans and other folks who've been incredibly supportive. But it's sometimes a really wonderful space and a space that's full of opportunity, and sometimes it's a challenging space.
And it's interesting you mentioned that too, because one, while you're saying the whole thing, I had to like tell myself like, stop, don't cry. I had to like wipe away the fake tears that are about to come. But the thing I was thinking about was, I have a couple of colleagues who have like the similar, I don't want to say like conundrum, I guess like bane, right? Where it's like, if you're the first person in a space doing something, it's groundbreaking, but then it's more eyes on you and they kind of scrutinize certain things that you do a little bit more than they would other colleagues. And then in addition to that, while it is great, there's also that feeling of isolation too, where you feel kind of like you're just alone on like a mountaintop.
And I think that there's some truth to that, and I think that to what I said earlier, like I hope that I'm not alone in this space. I hope that we are doing a better job of kind of drawing more people into the field. And I mean, I don't mean this just for South Asian women. I think just it's wonderful that law school leadership has changed a lot in the last 10, 15, 20 years. I think when I went to law school, it was unusual, extraordinarily rare to see people of color, to see women even in law school dean positions, or at least there just weren't as many. And now the fact that I think that there's over 60 deans of color at law schools, and there's only 200 law schools in the country. Like, that's pretty amazing. That's a lot of progress. So yes, there's a sense of being alone, but there's also a sense that we are working towards, again, greater diversity in leadership, which means a lot. It says a lot for institutions to be led by people who have lived different experiences, who kind of walk different paths than others who have come before them.
So I'm curious too, because you mentioned when you were in law school. When you were in law school, did you imagine yourself being in like higher education in this legal capacity?
No, I 100% did not.
Yeah.
I remember one of my mentors in law school, just a wonderful professor that I had, she even asked me during my second year of law school, like, have you thought about teaching? Is that something that you'd be interested in? And I was like, never.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think this is, again, a lack of exposure. I don't think I really knew what it was that law professors did. Mm-hmm. You know, you of course see them in the classrooms, but I don't think, I understood that they do a lot of research, writing, and advocacy work on issues that they care about to kind of move the law in a direction that they think is better, more fair, more thoughtful. I don't think I understood that there was a kind of whole rich life of kind of intellectual and scholarly life that law professors engaged in. I don't think I realized there was service to like national organizations that they engaged in. And it was only when I had friends of mine who became law professors and who really said to me, I think you should think about this as a career, that I took it seriously, and then went back and started talking to folks who were my professors in law school and others to try to get advice on joining what has been a tremendously gratifying career.
You know, while you were saying that, I had a thought, which was, I've met a lot of people, right, myself included, where when they talk about how they got into education, the first thought is, I never want to be a teacher. And I think we should do some research on the theory on what is that like pipeline for people, I hate teaching or I don't want to do it, to then being like the best in that field type shit, right? But maybe that's what I'll do for like my doctorate thesis. We'll cut that too, because I don't want to steal that idea. So going on to my next question, I want to ask you, can you tell us about the goals and impact of the workshop for Asian American women in legal academia that you co-hosted?
Yes, so this was a terrific workshop that I co-founded with a few other professors in 2021. I think at the time I was at my previous institution. We co-hosted this workshop with folks from a couple of other law schools who were all Asian American women in legal academia. And I think it was at a moment where we were struggling with the lack of community due to COVID, right? We had been separated for a long time. And it was actually soon after the murder of Asian American women in Atlanta that was very particularly racialized and dealt with a kind of level of sexism and misogyny that was, that kind of intersectional identity that came with that. And we talked about this idea for the need for community and the need for professional development opportunities, networking opportunities for this community of folks. And really, I want to, offer some respect to the Black women who have hosted similar workshops for many, many years, who have done a tremendous job in that community of building up community networks, professional development opportunities. And we thought, why not us too? And so that's what we started doing. This year will be the third year of that workshop. CUNY Law is actually hosting it this fall, really? Which I'm very excited about.
Do I get an invite?
If you want to,
Perfect.
come in October. It'll be delightful. We're really looking forward to it. That first workshop was on Zoom, and we didn't know whether it would be 5 of us who came or what, but over 100 people came on Zoom for a 2-day workshop, and it was amazing. Last year there was one that was held in person, and so this year will be the third iteration of it, also in person here.
Oh, that's amazing. And so what key challenges have you faced while advocating for diversity and inclusion in the legal system, and how have you addressed them?
So I think one of the fundamental challenges is a conception of what diversity and inclusion is.
Right.
Oftentimes people view this as some sort of zero-sum game where if some people are kind of included, or there's a broadening approach to like who is hired in a space or who is part of an organization, that there's got to be some other folks who kind of lose out because of that. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is helping people reconceptualize that and understand that diversity and inclusion is actually a strength for everybody. There's lots of studies that have been done, again, about how diverse organizations do better at, productivity, at problem solving, at working through adapting to new environments and new challenges. So this is actually something that can help people's organizations on a really fundamental level. And it's not just kind of some piecemeal lip service to like, oh, it'll be nice if we have a more diverse workforce or a more diverse student body or whatever else. So I think that conceptual piece is one of the biggest challenges. I have often found in my capacity as dean that individual conversations are a place to really help people think this through, because as wonderful as the age of the internet is, there's a lot of inaccurate information or inaccurate characterizations out there that sometimes is, or what people see and what they read. Right. So talking to people about the direct impact that diversity and inclusion can have on individual stories and then also on institutional success, I think has been one of the ways to help move those conversations along. But of course, that's extraordinarily labor intensive, and you can't have an individual conversation with everyone. Right. So we do our best in terms of programming, in terms of efforts to engage on that front.
And going off that individual conversation piece, it's interesting you mentioned that, because my immediate thought went to like how the algorithms are designed on like social media, to where you're basically pushed content that you yourself are interacting with, but then sometimes they'll throw in something that's like a Hail Mary, and depending on if you interact with that or not, then you get more of that on your feed.
Yes.
So then when it comes to like diversity work, I know that's a very polarizing topic, but when you really like get to the root of it, it's polarizing because a lot of the media out there based on that is marketed to two very different crowds.
That's right.
And then they just get like self-affirming bias. It's like confirmation bias, essentially.
Yes, I think that's right. So it's interesting that you say this. So one of the things I talked about last year at orientation with our new students was this importance, again, of listening to different viewpoints and reading broadly and thinking broadly, even in ways that challenge us and make us uncomfortable. Right. And last year I described an article that I had just read that was published in a magazine that one of my friends works for. And it was questioning whether DEI was a value that ought to be given a priority in higher education spaces. So I think we know from this conversation otherwise. I disagree with that thesis, but I read the whole article and I spent some time thinking about it, partly because it's important to understand where people are coming from. I can disagree strongly with the thesis of an article, but also learn something from it. I can think about what perspective the author or editors or whomever had in putting this piece forward. I mean, I think you still need to be selective with it. There's lots of folks with different political beliefs than I am who write in very thoughtful publications, and that's great. Am I going to read broadly enough to read the folks who are not kind of basing their reporting in reality or in facts? Probably not. But like there's still plenty of space in that in the world to resist those algorithms, right? And to kind of read and think broadly about issues, again, that are difficult and sometimes uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Like when you do read broadly, like for me, what I like to do is like when I do read these point of views that I don't myself necessarily agree with, I look at it and I absorb the information in a sense of, okay, these are their grievances with this.
Yeah.
How can I now take what I view as their grievances and transfer that to a quote-unquote solution? Because ultimately they have a grievance, and then the other side has a grievance. There has to be like a middle point where they meet, because if not, then there's always going to be on like two opposite ends of the spectrum. So like the way I look at it is like when you do actually consume a lot of viewpoints from the other side, you yourself are able to construct an argument, or not even an argument, like if you want to argue, but you're able to construct, let's say, a solution that makes both sides happy, so to speak. But of course the real world really isn't like that. You could think, oh my god, this is great, and then they'll be like, no, we don't want that. Because sometimes it's not 50-50. It'll be 60-40, 70-30. And that's what a compromise would look like.
I agree with that. And I also think, for law schools, I feel like this ought to be baked into what we do, right? So we have a bunch of students who will go into, kind of an adversarial court system in the work that they're doing. They are going to be better advocates and more thoughtful advocates if they have a better and more nuanced understanding of what the critiques are of their points of view or their clients' points of view. We also have folks who want to go into, nonprofit organization building and leadership roles in, being in elected office or something else. That requires, an ability to bring diverse groups of people together who might think very, very differently about things, and to find a way to manage through towards that problem-solving moment. So I feel like for law schools, given the fact that you can go here and then choose whatever path you want, like it's a versatile degree, this should be a part of the skill set that we are teaching our students, right? To think critically, but also to listen with real respect, even again when we disagree.
Agreed. And that's a great segue to my next question, which is, how do you envision the future of legal education with regard to embracing diversity and promoting social justice practices?
Yeah, so I mean, the twofold mission of CUNY Law School is to be kind of an access law school for folks who are historically excluded from legal education and the legal profession, but also to serve public interest and social justice, a mission of the school. So what you're asking goes right to the heart of what this place is about. And there are ways that we do that. We'll continue to recruit students from a wide variety of backgrounds. A lot of our students have come here as their second career after doing other things that will make them better lawyers because they bring different perspectives. They're not, as folks come straight through from undergraduate, but folks do a lot of other things before they come here too. And so I think that helps meet our mission of kind of having lots of different folks from different backgrounds here at the law school. And I think, again, we discussed this a little earlier, but the profound legal needs that are existent in New York and frankly in all around the world, those legal needs aren't going away. Right. And so to help channel more folks, to prepare them to be kind of ready practicing lawyers when they leave spaces like this and go out into the world to do that work, that's part of the way we fulfill that mission.
Thank you for that. And now we're winding down to the end of this segment, but I want to ask you, right, what has been your proudest accomplishment throughout your whole legal career?
Wow. That's hard. So I think there are a few things that I've done that I am particularly excited about. And to be clear, these are not things I did alone, right? I believe strongly in collaboration and working with teams. At my previous institution, I think founding a Center for Social Justice at a law school that did not have anything similar like that before, and going out and doing the fundraising and helping to build coalitions of alumni and external stakeholders and our own faculty and students to help build and support that center is one of the things I am most proud of. It does incredible work in the space of economic rights, in gender and sexual orientation rights, in racial justice. So it does terrific stuff. I have been extremely proud of that. And I want to say that being able to lead CUNY Law School is a tremendous, I'm tremendously grateful for that. This is a law school that is like no other place in American legal education in the sense that it is dedicated to diversifying the profession and to public interest lawyering. It has, again, one of the most diverse student bodies, faculty, and staff in the country. It provides a very affordable legal education that is also a top-notch legal education, right? Nationally ranked, highly regarded clinical programs, public interest programs. And to be able to lead in a place like this for the mission that this place has, that's wonderful. I feel like that's a tremendous accomplishment for me. I'm really grateful for it.
And I want to ask you, how's it been being the dean of the CUNY School of Law?
I mean, it's exciting. It's, and I guess I say this a year in, and I regularly tell this to friends, and I sometimes tell this to myself too, the first year that you're in a new space and meeting, hundreds of new people and acclimating to a new environment to work and live and all else, that's hard, right? It takes a lot of adjustment to do that. But I continue to be so grateful for the work that's done in this space, for the mission of the law school, and working collaboratively with some fantastic folks to move this forward and support these wonderful students.
Thank you for that. Now, the last question I have, and because the thing is, for me, this is my favorite question, even though I think for the last 5-10 guests or what have you, they've all given me the same answer, but I'm curious.
Okay, now I wonder if I'll fail the test or not.
Right, it's like the ultimate litmus test, but I'm curious. If you could go back in time and do anything differently, would you or would you not?
Oh my gosh.
It could be professional, personal, either or.
So I read this on a whiskey bottle some years ago, so I'll share it with you now. That's how I know it's going to be a good story. Right? Which is that if you made the decision that you made with the information that was before you at the time, that you shouldn't live your life with regrets. And I kind of think about that regularly because, of course, we all make mistakes in life, right? We all walk down a path and think, oh, maybe I could have done something differently. But I also feel like if you are thoughtful about the decisions that you make with the information you have in front of you, you shouldn't feel like, oh, what if I had done this? Because there's too many points in our lives where we could do that. And I am an optimist. I am also a person who's kind of looks at the world as a place of opportunity. And so I like to kind of think of it as like, okay, that's information and a lesson learned. And I've become a smarter and more thoughtful person for walking down a path that was perhaps not the best one. And I feel like I learned from it and grow.
So there wasn't a test, but you did pass if there was the test, because it's the same thing. Everyone's like, yeah, I wouldn't change anything. But the second thing is, what was the brand of that whiskey?
I know, I get asked that question because I've said this before and I don't remember.
Oh man, that's such a philosophical quote to have on. I mean, I can imagine, right? Like you're drinking whiskey and you're like, oh my God, now I'm gonna reevaluate all my life choices. I'm gonna look for that. I'm gonna look for that exact quote and I'm gonna gift you that bottle.
If you find it, I would love to hear about it.
Listen, that is gonna be the next thing that I'm gonna do after the workday is done.
Okay.
And with that being said, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, giving us this great conversation. But before we sign off, I want you to have the chance to, shout out any stakeholders, sponsors, anyone that you want to your designated camera, which is right there.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to be here. And I want to thank my colleagues here at the law school and at CUNY. As I said, it's been an exciting year, a terrific year, and I look forward to the one to come.
All right, guys, with that being said, that does wrap up episode 7 of Education in Color. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode. Thank you so much, Dean Setty, for joining us as well. And we'll see you guys next time for episode 8. Take care.